our African children, something that is so vital and important to us because that is our future. We know that we need a special program for our children. We are not able to do it at this point, but we are hoping that some of the brothers and sisters here who are members of the First World family can undertake that task. Because our children are in the streets of their lost, and they need help. And I think it's not enough for us to come here and learn all this information, just sit on it. We have to do something with it. So I think it's very important. I think that we ought to think about how we are going to go about Africanizing our children. Because they're in the hands of the enemy, and they're being Europeanized. We have to Africanize our children. That's very, very important if we want to face the African. Our speaker today, Dr. Amos will be speaking about our children are African. I didn't read anything on Dr. Lewis, but he's been here with us several times, and I know that he's the author of the book, the Black Child. Also, he's teaching at University of Rome, and at this point, it gives us great pleasure and a great honor to have him come before us and speak. I mentioned to him that he comes so seldom to us. It's probably a year ago since the last time that he spoke to us, and he must pay attention to us so often about
honor to be invited to speak with you again here today. And I hope you accept my apologies for taking so long to get back. However, it has not been because I had forgotten you, of course, but because you put so much on my mind. I have, during the interim, I've been working on the second book, the physical title, which is called The Fundamentals of a Black Psychotherapeutic Psychology. Of course, there won't be other titles, but it's the working title. Trying to deal with the issue of the fact that neurotypical psychology is inadequate to meet the needs of our people and to establish a basis for an ethnocentric psychology that will move our people forward. I was simply to talk a bit about this subject of today, particularly in relationship to what I would call also a psychotherapeutic psychology for African and African people, as well as educational psychology to meet the needs of our children. I was struck, though, today as I began to saw the clip, the newspapers, particularly the New York Times and so forth, and going to somewhat, I think extemporaneously, give me, but I want to deal with some issues here that I saw in the paper there of last week. Very much fits, of course, what I had planned to talk about, which was the education of our children. Very much fits also the emphasis that I have been repeating time and time again to various audiences, and that is the idea that education is for survival. Education is about life. It is not principally about jobs. It is not principally about getting an equal income and about living in so-called better houses or living in so-called integrated settings. It is about life and survival itself. I have reiterated to audiences that every culture educates its children. There is no culture that does not educate its children. Even the so-called most primitive culture engages in the education of the children, even if it is the teaching of how to hunt and gather, how to dig a hole and take the plant, how to fish, how to shoot bows and arrows, learning the rituals of the group and of the community. That is education. And the fundamental function of education is to advance the interest and to maintain the culture of that group. And when we talk about the education of our children, then we are not only talking about equal opportunity, but we are talking about the continuing survival of black people on this globe. And it is just that serious, ladies and gentlemen. Often, though, when I talk about this subject, I still get a few unbelievers and people who think that I see somewhat speculative in my history. And people who are still bothered about the fact that I speak to black issues and not to about the poor children, about the disadvantaged child, and I'm speaking about the African child, or the unity African child that I am concerned with. It struck me, though, that maybe what I should do after looking at this week's New York Times, that maybe, many of our people have problems believing ourselves. It always amazes me, and I have to tell my students this, that the European becomes the arbiter of truth, becomes the validator of knowledge. And the fact that this people has been the most deceitful people in their relationship to black people. They have been people who have lied to us most of all. And they have been people who have tricked us most of all. And yet somehow we still see them as the supreme source of truth. And it's the supreme validator of what truth is. So in light of this kind of reach, I'm going to read you a bit of the Europeans' concern about education for a moment. As published in the New York Times in April 1928. No doubt many of you have heard of it. That I'm going to read a bit, and I hope you will indulge me, of the excerpt from the report on excellence in education. And no doubt you've heard about the Commission on Education and the report that came out and the talk now that is going on about that. And it is because it seems an echo of what I myself have been saying many times. This report begins, our nation is at risk. The recognition that the United States is in danger of losing its supremacy in the world. It's on the nation, sometimes a lot of people talk about, well, we want to get into the mainstream. We want to be as one. We want to get peace to pie. Pie is the spirit. As I say many times, ladies and gentlemen, civilizations come and go. This will pass away the way others have passed. And more than you're concerned about getting into the mainstream, maybe getting out of it. Because it's only without. And our concern is not to be going down with the ship. We see here in this obviously recognition that this nation is in serious danger. Our once unchallenged preeminence, they're saying here, in commerce, industry, science, and technological innovation is being overtaken by competitors throughout the world. In this nation now, they are not trying about, we want to integrate with the pagan. We want to go to school with them. We want some black boys, little white girls holding hands. But are concerned about their very survival in the world. And concerned about the fact that the true education of their people is directly connected with the true survival of their country. This report is concerned with one of the many causes and dimensions of the problem, but it is one that undergirds American prosperity, security, and stability. The risks they talk about. History is not kind to either. I think that's a lesson that we ourselves certainly will have to face. History is not kind to a people who sit still and the people who have literally gone to sleep, as too many of our people have done. America's position in the world may once have been reasonably secure, with only a few exceptionally trained men and women. It is no longer. This country that used to steal the brains of nations and used to pay those nations high prices, this country that stole the brains after the Second World War of German scientists, this country that destroyed many other nations and lived for a while without competition, now recognizes that it can no longer live in this high-fashion way. And it now must scratch for its own survival. The risk is not only, they say, that Japan makes automobiles more efficiently than America and has government subsidies for development and export. It is not just that South Koreans recently built the world's most efficient steel mill, or that American machine tools, once the pride of the world, are being displaced by German products. It is also that these developments signify a redistribution of training capability throughout the globe. Knowledge, learning, information, and skills intelligence are the raw materials of international commerce. Learning is the indispensable investment required for success in the information age that we are now entering. Our concern, however, goes well beyond matters such as industry and commerce. It also includes the intellectual, moral, and spiritual strength of our people, which knits together the very fabric of our society. Is this the society that we want to integrate our children into? Is this the society and the people that you want to bring together life? As we often hear so many of our people saying, is this the society we don't want our children to be any different from? We can see that this is a society itself in trouble. But what we also see here is a society that is recognized, as I have often warned, that education and the quality of learning of its children is necessary for its continued survival, for maintaining its moral integrity, what moral integrity it has, and for maintaining what it sees as its prosperity. Indicators of the risk, they mention a few here. It revealed that on 19 academic tests, American students were never first or second. Mind you, some other people in comparison with other industrialized nations, and were last 7 times. They can generally remind you of the fact that what we see in this society is not equal education, but superior education. Many of us got disturbed when the Elijah Muhammad told us about superiority. And every day I live, I see the beauty of that man, the beauty of his philosophy, of his psychology. I often tell our social workers and our psychologists that the man you should study in terms of psychology and social work is not Freud and Jung as much as it is the study of Elijah Muhammad, the greatest of our psychologists. I went to someone the other day that said, I'm studying community organization. It is an index study of community organization from under School of Social Work. Well, this class is graduating, and I congratulate them on graduating because I wrote Once they graduate, they can begin to be educated. Because we know that these schools are not dedicated to the kind of education that white people need. They're dedicated to inculcating an ignorance in our people and maintaining that ignorance in our people. You are studying community organization. You didn't study like Muhammad, who organized hundreds of thousands of white people. You didn't study Marcus Garvey, who organized hundreds of thousands of white people. You didn't study many of the white communities that organized white people day in, day out. This your degree is not going to do you any good, because the very people you study have never organized white people. How can they be service? The very powerful that is necessary for removing our people from the subjugation and subordination. The very philosophers and psychologists and economists and others are reside in our own community. And it is these people that should become a part and the central portion of the education of the black man for the ages. So then, we have here a statement that the average achievement of high school students on most standardized tests is now more than 26 years ago, with studies plus. Over half the population of gifted students do not match their testing ability with comparable achievement. We just move here for a moment. Now a special statement was made to parents and students. You know, to the parents, you know that you cannot confidently launch your children into today's world unless they are of strong character, well educated in the use of language, science, and mathematics. They must possess a deep respect for intelligence, achievement, and learning, and the skills needed to handle them, for setting goals, for disciplined work. Yes, they must be accompanied by an intolerance for shoddy and second-rate masquerading as good enough. Again, we get an echo that is so necessary for our own instruction here, ladies and gentlemen. When we look at the Japanese, which these people are looking at, we see here a people who are very precise, who are very much concerned and are very careful, whose approach to knowledge is one that is not slipshod. And we have seen in that knowledge and that approach to knowledge, they ought. They go on to say to the parents, but your right to a proper education for your children carries a double responsibility. You must be a living example of what you expect your children to honor and to emulate. However, you bear a responsibility to participate actively in your child's education. We're recognizing that we as white parents have too long left the responsibility for the education of our children up to the school. That it is essential that white parents and white culture itself participate in the education of its children. You may want your child to advance in terms of its intellectual and scholastic development. You may want it to have better teachers and better schools. But the intellectual growth and the scholastic growth of black children must ultimately be grounded in an intellectual and scholastic black culture. The Japanese just do not send their children to school. The culture itself is school as well as the formal building in which those children enter. The culture of our people then must itself become one that honors intellect and scholarship. Finally, it says, help them to understand that excellence in education cannot be achieved without intellectual and moral integrity coupled with hard work and commitment. Children will look to their parents and teachers as models of such virtue. I often reiterate that you must model to your children what you want them to be. You may preach, you may scream, you may holler, but the greatest lesson that you can teach your child is to be illustrative of what you're talking about. One of the greatest influences for getting our children to read is to get the parents themselves to read. When you work to your full capacity, you can hope to attain knowledge and skills that will enable you to create your future. And this is something I like, and you see here again, the coupling of the creation of the future with, of course, the fulfillment of the capacity to learn. You can hope to attain the knowledge and skill that will enable you to create your future and to control your destiny. If you do not, you will have your future thrust upon you by others. Take hold of your life. Apply your gifts and talents. Work with dedication and self-discipline. Have high expectations of yourself. Convert every challenge into an opportunity. A lesson that when we say things to the it's supposed to be racist. When the disciples, when Marcus Garvey told us that our destiny was in our hands, and that we could make and create our destiny, he was seen as a separatist and as a person who was dedicated to the hatred of whites, or dedicated to the separation of black people, or dedicated to returning us back to the African continent. I'm amazed when I read this man, Marcus Garvey, how much up to date he is, and how much he predicted the exact kind of dilemma that we are going through today. Now, this is a big final word to bear. Our final word perhaps better characterized as a plea is that all segments of our population give attention to the implementation of our recommendations. Our present fight did not appear overnight, as responsibility for our current situation is widespread. Reform of our educational system will take time and unrelenting commitment. It will require equally widespread and dedicated action. Help should come from students themselves, from parents, teachers, school boards, from colleges and universities, and it goes on. It is their America, the America of all of us, that is at risk. It is to each of us that this imperative is addressed. It is by our willingness to take up the challenge and our resolve to see it through that America's place in the world will either be secured or forfeited. Americans have succeeded before, and we shall again. So again, we see here not a plea for sending the American children to school with the Japanese, not a plea for busing, not excuses about how disadvantaged the children are, not excuses about a history of discrimination and how we cannot learn, but a plea to the challenge that stands before us, and a recognition that unless education is entered into with full urgency, that the place of this nation will be insecure and that it will be ruled over by other nations. The same situation then faces our own people. If we refuse to educate our children, if we refuse to build up their intellectual capacity, then they will continue to be the subordinates of other people and other nations. But more so than that, it may be that our people may not continue to exist at all. We saw a situation here in the last 2 weeks of Ronald Reagan talking about Star Wars. And some of you saw the Newsweek magazine, and some people were ridiculing Reagan's Star Wars speech. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not a laughing matter. We recognize that we have entered into the age of Star Wars. We are seeing then that the world will expand into space. And when we look at that expanding world, we have to look at our own selves as African people. I often ask my audiences, how many people saw the movie Star Wars? How many of you did see that movie? My director did that movie, by the way. One we should see. Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. Sometimes we as nationalists, we get a little afraid to check out these Eurocentric movies. However, it pays at times to know your enemy. And it pays at times to see these movies, because these movies are not just fantasy. It's good. As I've often say, that we have people like Margaret Walker, who won a Pulitzer Prize for The Color Purple. We have many of our illustrious female writers, Toni Morrison, and some of the Maya Angelou and some of the others. And it's nice to have some good family novels talking about the family struggles of Black people and the complete self-realization of Black women. It is wonderful. But it is also necessary for us to develop other genres of literature. One of the genres I think that we're missing most of all is the genre of science fiction. For some reason or other, many of us think that writing about science fiction does not fit within the Black African image. Many of us, I think, would find it hard to imagine rocket ships and to imagine Black men as astronauts and Black men exploring planets and Black men exploring space. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is the world that we're entering into, and it's the world of the future. For many of us, that kind of fantasy is just a fantasy. And it is a flight of imagination that does not fit the reality of African people. However, I have to remind you again that when the Europeans were writing about flying to the moon, when they were writing about time machines, and when they were talking about Buck Rogers and the other people, they too were not engaged in the actual flight to the moon. But it is in fantasy that one begins to create reality. It is through visualization and through having a vision that one creates that vision and brings it into concrete being. If we as a people dare not dream, and dare not fantasize, and dare not imagine, then we cannot create and bring into being those things of imagination. I've often said, and I've said here before, that what you cannot imagine, you cannot create. When you look at this building, it is a building that was first created in the imagination of someone's head. It was a fantasy. It was a symbol. It was a group of lines and circles and what have you on paper. But from those imaginings and from those circles and from those symbols have come into being a building of concrete. Everything that we see that exists outside here today that is man-made, or that we see exists here that is man-made, was first a vision in some man or some woman's mind. First a fantasy, first an imagination, and then later a concrete reality. The first thing that the European tries to kill in the Black man's brain is his imagination and his ability to create fantasy. And in killing the imagination, he kills the possibility. Why is it then that the black man does not rule the world today as he ruled it once before, because we as a people have stopped imagining that we can rule the world as we ruled it before. When we begin to imagine and to visualize and work to make those visions come true, then they will actualize themselves into being. When we looked at that Star Wars, we saw Star Wars as a movie there based upon the reality of current scientific research. Science fiction is not just a leap into fantasy. It is a way you imagine and fantasize based on what is happening in science, the use for what is going on in current research in science. Many scientists are addicts of science fiction, and many scientists are writers of science fiction. When you looked at Star Wars then, there was a play in the imagination about what this world would be in the past the year 2000. And once you look at it, you note that there were many things left out of that dream. Many things left out of that fantasy. And one of the things you saw left out of that fantasy was black people. In fact, the only thing you saw there black was Darth Vader. And black was representing standard symbol, evil and bad. And they tell me Darth Vader was played by a black man. Again, symbolizing Ralph Ellison's novel, The Invisible Man. So what else do we see there in Star Wars? In a sense, you see that almost anything that was not white in that movie was somewhat monstrous, was distorted, were mutants. And one thing that struck me in looking at that movie, and I'm sure struck many people, but it struck them for a different reason, I think, was of course the cafe scene. The famous scene there with these monstrous-looking people playing music, dancing and cutting and fighting. Makes you wonder what kind of symbolism is in there. Was that indeed the future of our people after having suffered from the Third World War and having their genes mutated by radiation and having our genes destroyed by the pollution that is poisoning this earth today? Will we still be making music for the white man in the future? Or will we take the challenge that now lies before us and get in control of those shifts and get in control of our future? You looked in the second sequel there, The Empire Strikes Back. And of course, in that sequel, they put black man there. After we complained a great deal about what it meant in the first. So, of course, they threw out a poker into the second. Of course, he still was a little on the shady side. So, still not quite too clean here. So. But the other thing you see there was the city that he supposedly was in charge of. That city floating in the midst of space. A space city. And of course, when you go back to the first movie as well as the second one, you see there's this giant satellite, a war satellite that's developed by Darth Vader and his group. Now that seems like fantasy, but ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what the United States and the Russians are in the process now of developing. When they send a man into space today, to see if he will walk in space, to see if he can manipulate himself in space, to see what he can do while floating in space, to see how long he can stay in space before returning to the earth. Is this just games they're playing? No, it's not games. It's based on, it is an experiment to see how long these men will construct the space cities And the space satellites can stay out in space and build these necessary war machines and these other space stations that will be way stations to outer space of the future. When you saw Columbia go up and you saw the Challenger go up, and there was some emphasis on, well, how much tonnage can they carry? Can they carry 65,000 tons and so forth? Was it merely an exercise in bigness? No, ladies and gentlemen, it was a test of the capacity of those machines to carry tons of material into space that will be used to build those space stations of the future. That will be used to build those killer satellites. That will be used to build those satellites which will fire upon the Earth. So then what we're engaged here in Star Wars is not then science fiction, but a plunge into the future and an attempt to control that future. Those nations that have not educated their children to face these Star Wars will be nations that will continue to be subjugated and subordinated to the nations that can fly into space. The weapons that are currently being developed out there now are weapons, of course, that many of us might have some knowledge about. Those that, you remember the guy that was caught here in England, and he turned the secrets over to the Russians, and it shows that these satellites that the Americans take in space 400 and 500 miles out were able to listen to conversations that were taking place in the Kremlin, were able to pick up conversations between the tanks and between the units of the Russian armies, were able to photograph some of their photographing equipment is so sharp that from 400 or 500 miles out in space, they can photograph the numbers right off the license plate of your car. These machines that are now float in space not only tell you the weather, but they can look under the Earth, and they X-ray Earth, and they use for geological missions to tell where the resources lie upon the face of the Earth. They can tell where the units of a nation's armies are, where its missiles are, and where the movement of its armies and groups are. So those nations, no matter how good their ground troops may be, no matter how good your tanks may be, no matter how good your jets may be, if you are not prepared to fight in space and to destroy those killable satellites, then you may as well surrender before the war starts. So when we look at the condition of our African people, we must recognize then that when we talk about the education of African children, we are talking about the very survival and the continued existence of our people, not mere equal job opportunities. When we recognize that every day, as you have seen and you listen to what's going on in Washington, you'll know now that they just voted Russell's house in to end this environmental pollution agency or what have you. Of course, I saw Brent was saying they called him the Godfather or taxi brain. Coming back here to straighten that agency out. Because, of course, this nation has begun to recognize, and even Reagan and these right-wing Republicans have begun to recognize that this earth is being poisoned, that it is being polluted, and that if we are not careful, the earth will be made unlivable. And it is fast becoming unlivable at this very moment. And therefore, something must be done to clean it up, or else we are going to face a situation where the genetic character of human beings will change drastically. New forms, illnesses, and diseases, and other disasters may begin to strike the earth. There is also concern among people about the possibility of a third world war. And we see many of our brothers getting out here and sisters getting out here talking about stopping the nuclear holocaust. Because now the white man is in a position to end life on earth and to blow the earth away. But we also must recognize another thing, ladies and gentlemen. That it has been the end of human life. That the European is already preparing through his Star Wars mission to lead this earth. As he builds these satellites, these way stations, he's getting ready now. As he sucks the resources out of the whole of this earth, as he eats up the resources that are under the lands of our people, and once he sucks up the resources out of the oceans of this earth, he has now already prepared himself to mine the resources of the other planets. He has already planted his flag upon the moon. The astronauts, when they dug into the core of that moon, did not dig only to bring back moon dust and to bring back moon rock, but to bring back an assay of what minerals and other substances exist on that moon, so that the moon can be mined in the future and be a source of resources and energy for a people that may be moving out into space. And we have to ask ourselves this question: where is the African flag upon these planets? I often sort of musingly say that I can see us in the future as African people the way we are now in the present, picketing for a fair planet. Talking about how slum-like the earth has become, how poisonous our earth is. Let us live on the moon. With you, let us move on. Oh, but it costs too much money. You're not qualified. This and that. I can see us again facing this kind of issue. So then we, as a people, should be very urgently concerned about education, about people, and about education, about children. It is not about jobs. And in the statement that I read you, there is not one reference in here about getting better jobs, about equal pay. No reference in here about integrating and going to live among the Japanese, or going to live the Russians. Well, they're ahead of us. We may as well learn to live with them. That's not in here. It is about meeting that challenge and being independent. It is about being in control of their destiny. And this is the concern then of our people as well. I want to talk a bit, I'm not going to talk too long here because, as I did in the other lectures, I don't want to consume all of the time. I don't have the chance to talk with you and in your comments and to answer some of your questions, or at least to respond to them, and give you, of course, respond one to the other. But I just want to briefly talk about what I call the foundation of a Black educational and therapeutic psychology. Particularly, do I want to talk about the political context of the education of the Black child, and the political context of what we might call neurotic and psychotic behavior among our people. One of the major problems in Eurocentric education is the fact that Eurocentric education deceives our people into pretending that it is objective and that it is purely political. Every discipline is political. All education is political. All education is geared towards political ends. If anyone tells you that they are giving you a non-political education, an objective education, a universal education, they are deceiving you at that moment. Psychology is just as much a part of European imperialism as is European technology and European physics. In fact, it is getting to be more of a part of European imperialism. For in the future, the great war weapons may not be so much the nuclear weapon, but will be the psychological weapon, and what we call psychochemical warfare, and what we would call biological warfare, the very subtle form of warfare. So then, as I pointed out to you before, the American university is as much a part of the American war machine as is the American army. And it is as dedicated to subjugating and subordinating our people as is the American capitalist in industry. One of the important milestones in the development of the person is what we call in psychology the achievement of constancy. The recognition that certain properties of objects, ideas, and intentions do not change despite superficial transformations or cosmetic changes in the appearances of these objects or ideas. That is, that objects and ideas, despite the fact that they may appear to be different, quite often are identical. The ability of the child, the ability of the adult to recognize the identity of an idea, despite the change, is a major accomplishment in the development of the child and of the adult. If the person cannot recognize the identity or sameness of an object or an idea despite the various appearances, he might easily be deceived by appearances and will react unrealistically and ineffectively to superficial transformation. He will react as if the superficial change is substantial and new. His action will be essentially reactive and determined by his apparent perception and not by his knowledge that frees him from captivity to the mere apparent. In order for the African man of European imperialism and manipulatory control, the European is a master of disguise. Yes. At times he reveals his true face and shows you the devil that he is. He demonstrates his pure ugliness, meanness of spirit, his savage ability to inflict pain and suffering and degradation and division and negation, and his deadliness upon the other peoples of his world. But at other times, he puts on a deceptive face of enlightenment, of humaneness, of charity, of civilization. And at times, he perversely dons the apparel, dons the transvestizing apparel of the white female, Jezebel, or Delilah, who introduces the worship of the devil and destroys righteous men, or who steals the strength of otherwise powerful men, blinds them, betrays them, and leaves them crushed under the stone weight of their folly. The whole part of the devil is deception and trickery and temptation. The European is a master illusionist who buys your soul, appears to be the fulfillment of your desire before he burns you in hell. While the European devil reveals his ugliness in South Africa and in its region, in the faces of his racist policemen, and in the murderous mobs such as the ones in South and and in other sundry places in this land and across this globe, he mostly beguiles through creating the hallucination of freedom, the hallucination of independence, the hallucination of progress in the fevered minds of black men, while seeking to shackle them more securely in invisible chains of bondage. Chains that may appear to be weightless, chains that do not rattle, chains that do not drag in the dust, but chains that are all the more binding for possessing these very characteristics. We are faced then with this devil, with this man who is weaving and changing appearances, but whose intentions have not changed since the time we met him thousands of years ago. All the mirages and the illusions that the European man weaves for the black man today. What are the identities the constancies which are hidden behind the faces of European change. We can only look at a few today. And the reason why I'm emphasizing these, I want you to understand that despite apparent change, despite the apparent freedom of our people, despite the apparent progress of our people, the intentions of the Europeans have not changed in one iota. And our children and their behavior and their minds are being shaped by these constant intentions. It is these intentions and these constant ideas of the European that we must learn to recognize despite the appearances of progress. As a matter of fact, we will find that the Europeans will use so-called obvious progress of black people as a means of maintaining us in bondage. What are some of the things that have not changed? We cannot name them all. We will just look at a few. The European is still determined to remain the most powerful and stay in control of the means of production. To not only to stay in the means of control of the means of production, but to stay in control of their allocation and distribution and of the world economy. So despite the fact that you may sleep with them, that you may marry them, that you may eat with them, that you may go to school with them, that you may sit around at your conference table with them, the European is not about to give up control of your life. That I just finished reading, you see in there, not in people who are getting ready to take second place in the world, but in people who did after Sputnik, and saw the challenge, and said, well, the Russians sent this breakthrough into space, we're going to send out there to the moon. And now they see again the Japanese challenge, and they are worried about this challenge, ladies and gentlemen. One of the things that amuses me is, of course, this book here we call Discover Magazine, which I highly recommend, by the way, because we as people do not read enough science. And there are excellent scientific publications out there now. Science Digest, which will keep you right up to date. And if you use it, can project you directly into the future as to what is going on. These magazines should grace your coffee table and should be a part of your library. These are not people's magazines. These are the magazines of our people as well. We have been the founders of science, and when we study science, we are only studying the heritage of the African man. And so it says here at FI, America's leading science magazine, discovered IQ of the Japanese really smarter. This edition is September 1982 edition. And you should read it. I think it's very instructive. Because in this edition, this country heard about the fact that the Japanese now average about 15 points higher on IQ exams than do Americans. Doesn't that sound a bit familiar? That famous 15-point difference that Jensen made so much about. And now, of course, not only are they 15 points ahead, but they're 15 points ahead on the American exam. This is why I tell my fellow black psychologists, don't bring me in black intelligence, the so-called big tests and those exams that are specially designed to tap the black talent. We don't need any special exams. You tell that white man, you bring me any exam you can, and I will defeat it for you. The Japanese does not run away from Wexford. He does not run away from Binet. He does not say, I'm from a different culture. He says, bring me one from your culture, any culture you want, and I will like that too. This is the kind of intellect that you must develop in your soul if you are to remove the subjugation of our people the world over. The amazing thing about the Japanese IQ, ladies and gentlemen, is that it has been growing. You see, and it's alarmed these people. Since 1945, it's 1 or 2 points ahead, and it just moves points and points, and they're wondering now, when is it going to stop? And this is very much fitting to our own situation. And it amuses me to see these Americans caught in their own dilemma. When they were 15 points ahead of us, it was due to genetics. It was due to the innate Africanness of our people. Now, of course, can they say it's due to the innate smartness of Japanese people? And now they do it. It must be the way they are studied. And inside here, they say comparisons of how much half Japanese get. What kind of schools they're in. What kind of homes they come from. What kind of values they have. All of these kind of things. Because all of a sudden, we're recognizing that it must be something in their culture and in their value systems and in their family systems that is moving them beyond and forward. That's the reason why I warn our people, which does no good to debate with Denton and these other people about the intelligence of our children. There is no waste of time. You take the intelligence of your children for granted and you move on from there. So then, the idea is that the European has changed. In fact, the change that you have seen is change that has been developed in order to maintain power. Integrationism is one of the danger means by which the Europeans intend to stay involved. Egalitarianism is one of the means by which he intends to stay involved. Giving you the same education that he had is one of the means by which he intends to stay involved. But we can learn that it is much easier to educate an African elite and make that African elite a broker between African people and European power than it is to maintain naked colonial domination of those people. The major function, you educated black people, the major function of educating the black person in the university today is to put a black face on white power. So that you can stand up and confuse your people and make them think that you actually represent something of something. Sometimes when I sit around with these whites and we're discussing issues, sometimes you almost say, you wait for them to break out, and you know this is a joke. But you really, we're just bringing you in here to play the game. You know, in the end, we're going to do what we want to do. But some of us are foolish enough to think that we really have some real impact. And that we're changing the system from the inside. But it is our systems and our inside that So it is to make our people, as we see in neocolonialism, to put the African leader in front, to create the illusion of independence, and create the illusion of freedom, and create the illusion of autonomy, so that the European imperialists can continue to economically rape the nations of our people. So that when those people rise up and are dissatisfied about the malnutrition and the illiteracy and the other problems that plague them, they will attack their African leaders and hold them responsible for what is happening to them. And while the African leader who's concerned about maintaining power fights his own people, jails them and does what is necessary to hold them under control, the European continues to rob and steal from them. This is why it is necessary to educate an African elite in this culture, so that the apparent education of our people appears can be used as a means of maintaining the dominance of our people, not releasing them from freedom. As I have often said, ladies and gentlemen, the European is only 10% of the world's population. When we look at the size of Europe, it is the whole combined portion of Europe. It is hardly much bigger than Texas or some of these other areas. And yet this 10% rules over the 90% of non-European people. These people who have no resources to speak of under their soil are ruling over the people who contain the wealth of the world. The United States, we are talking about Challenger. We talked about Columbia going into space. We talked about the jet age. We talked about telecommunications. Those technologies require metals that are not found even in the soil of this country. They can only be found basically in two areas of the world, in Africa and in Russia. There are strategic metals without which the United States could not carry on its technological advancement. And they are found in the land of our people. And yet, what do we have here? This group of people who are essentially resourceful. And again, if we look at Japan, which is basically a rock in the Pacific, and yet we have the paradox of literally the poorest resource nation in the world containing the richest people in the world, and the nations with the greatest resources contain the people who are starving to death. This can only be possible if a devil is at work and is deceiving the rest of the world. The subjugation of our people then apparently must depend upon the continuing ignorance of our people the world over. And you must know then that even the educational institutions of this country and the Eurocentric educational institutions are not about to remove that ignorance and not about to prepare you for a true education that will put you in control of your own resources and of your own wealth. When I read the African press, and I'm looking here at a situation here, Wall Street Journal, March 28th, the end of a dream. Once the showplace of Black Africa, Ghana now is near collapse. And it goes on to say, 2 decades ago, the African Pavilion was the centerpiece of an international trade fair, a modern edifice that represents the aspiration of Black Africa. Today, its roof has fallen in, its foundations gather mold, and its empty window frame serves as passage for birds in flight. Goes on to say, Ghana, which in 1967 became Black Africa's first independent state, is today a nation rapidly grinding to a halt. The decline began not long after independence from Britain, when Ghana began to borrow heavily and to build showcase development projects such as dams, ports, highways. Little money was left over for the development of natural resources. Over the next 2 decades, factories, roads, telephone lines were allowed to decay. Resources of timber, gold, oil, bauxite, and fertile soil were neglected. Although many Ghanaians are highly educated and skilled, they found less and less work here and began to leave the country in search of a better life. Reminds me of those people who want to leave the so-called ghettos of Harlem in search of a better life in the suburbs. Those educated ones. You see, we've been told that education is the answer. But we see that education literally is not answering the needs of this nation. It's not only that education is the answer, it must be an Afrocentric education. One of the reasons that this great and sizable educated group cannot leave this country out of the situation that it's in is because they were not educated to do something. Just as you educated people are not educated to leave their people out of the situation that they're in today. How often come in is when I walk down 125th Street, it is enough to make me cry. When every shop that I look in, there is an Asian face staring out. And then I hear about people complaining, they won't give us jobs. They treat us this way, they treat us that way. And then I hear us going with that begging for jobs. Every time we hear, last night we heard about the increase in employment. But then when you read the black statistics, the unemployment has increased. So there's a general decrease in unemployment, but we're not talking about black people. We talk about things like teenagers. And yet, what you have to see is the people who are complaining about how these people are not hiring their teenagers. Why complain? I have no patience for like they're complaining about athletes and not hiring our teenagers. It is your money. You are supporting these people. Why can't it be your own place? Why can't you hire your own children? Why must you support the children and the people of other people and then complain about how these people neglect it? And the amazing thing is that the taking over of the Harlem community is occurring at the point when we are producing probably the largest numbers of MBAs, degrees in business administration, PhDs in economics, and we got to fight what's up on the stand and so forth and so on. And yet these degrees and yet this knowledge about business administration and economics cannot even prepare you to take control of your own community. This must make you stop and think that these degrees are not designed for that. Of course, they're designed for us only to serve the interests of the Europeans. It goes on to say because they in situations centuries when they can be found cost 120 cities a package, or 10 times the average daily salary of a Canadian. An egg costs more than a day's wage. A school textbook, if it is available, can cost the equivalent of 20 days' salary. So, ladies and gentlemen, the situation that the white man faces today is dire. You mentioned there further, among other things, scholars. Just Ghana was once the educational capital of Black Africa. It still has a big educated class. And many of the people who went to work in Nigeria were teachers. But today the schools are struggling. There are plenty of teachers, but no books and no starting knives, referring to the technical truth. Some of the remedies that are needed are for government agriculture. It is simply ridiculous that we should be importing food. And it's a situation, it is a miserable situation. I was reading here again a report on the Sudan and its creation and growth of cotton that feeds the textile mills of England and so forth. And despite the fact that they're producing such large amounts of cotton, for some reason or other, they cannot locate textile mills within their own borders. And they must send out the raw materials of their cotton and buy back the cloth that is refined in England as a much higher price and must be robbed of their natural resources. Of course, let us not mourn for the Sudan. We'll get the same thing going on in this country. When this radio told you very clearly that the dollar that you make is not turned over once in your community. That the work and the labor that you put into these jobs day in and day out is immediately turned back over to your master to be used to maintain labor and domination. So there's a situation that is the general and education and economics. It's not an education that you prepare you to work for IBM and AT&T, but to rectify this kind of situation that continues to rob our people. Clouds of diplomats flowing with their robes down in the reception rooms and the corridors of the White House and Buckingham Palace and in the Kremlin and in the UN and in the Hague, African nations for the past 3 decades, which appeared to have achieved a terrible liberation and in prison, have come only to realize their confining entanglement in the web of neocolonialism. The Afro-Americans, too, have come to realize that though he sits in the councils of the mighty, on the Supreme Court of the land, in city halls across the country, in boardrooms of industrial giants, and head departments of great seats of learning, he has yet to escape the entanglements of neo-slavery, that he has yet to achieve real power, that he is no more truly powerful today than he was 400 years ago. We have to ask ourselves a basic question. Are we, as African people, in any better position to protect our women and our children against enslavement than our forefathers were 400 years ago? And this will give you an idea of how much we have actually progressed. As a matter of fact, the European, in terms of military might, another might has grown even stronger since that time. So what progress we think we are having is an illusion. The social arrangements of slavery, the specialized labor of black man, was dedicated to the maximization of profits of the white man. This still exists today. Some of us, as I said, we think now that we have specialists and we are computer technologists and we are this and we are that, we think that we are moving. But as I often pointed out, we weren't specialists under slavery. All black people were not field hands. All black people were not house servants. There were carpenters and iron workers and blacksmiths. There were ship builders and many other skilled people who went out. In fact, in some areas of the country, at the end of slavery, you had more black skilled people than you had white. So the idea that you have skills and that you have these specialties is nothing new. We've seen this game before. That is for which is served then, the maximization of the slave master's profits is exactly the same purpose it is served today. Your specialty is geared to the maximization of the profits of your European masters. The need for Europeans to coordinate the rest of the world to meet his greedy needs has not diminished the slightly appearance of greater equality among nations and equality among Afro-Americans and Euro-Americans. In fact, as I said, the appearance of equality is the means by which inequality is maintained. The European has a situation where he plans to win both ways. You know, a lot of us were a little taken aback when Wallace was re-elected in Alabama. But if we had studied the brainwashing of the black man in the country, if we studied the United States in which the Europeans teach the black man, the world over, this should not have come as a surprise to us. The white man and the Europeans, of course, is smart enough to figure that he can have it both ways. When it is necessary for him to put his foot upon your neck, and when it is necessary for him to be extremely racist and justify his treatment of in terms of racism, when it was necessary for Wallace to stand in front of that door and call us out of our names, it got him into the guns' skin. Now, when it's necessary to kiss your baby, and shake your hand and flatter you, he's right back in there again. Well, this is an old psychological game. I also run into it in some of the cases where we study abnormal psychology. Oh, yes, we are abnormal. And I'll deal with that in a minute. We are abnormal. But it reminds you of the abused child and the rejected child is a very interesting individual, particularly one that has not been rejected of love from his family. And it's interesting to watch many of these children as they go into adults. I meet many of them as adults, 30, 40, 50 years old, still, and some who are older, they're still concerned about what their mother loves them about. Still, you know, their primary concern was, did mama love me, did she accept me? They neglect their own families and their own priorities, still seeking the love of a mother or a father. And they excuse their own right behavior because they were rejected by their mothers. Another interesting thing about them is that they quite often will make all kinds of sacrifices to help to the needs of the rejected parents. Quite often, the children that were spoiled by the parents neglect the parents and abuse the parents and mistreat the parents. But the one that was the black sheep, so to speak, is the one that's there every time the parents are sick, every time they need money, and so forth. And that the more they sacrifice and the more they give, one day mom is going to finally recognize them and love them. Reminds me of the black people, abused and enslaved, discriminated against, mistreated, rejected, made a black sheep by his European master, and yet who made his major priority for love and acceptance of his European master. And you will see him going out, trying to prove how much he sacrificed for his master. I call it the Revolutionary War. I call it the Civil War. I call it the Korean War. I call it World War II. I give him my letter. Because he still doesn't accept it. Daddy, white man, who you going to recognize all I've done for you and accept me into your home? Because if you're going to make all those sacrifices, the worst of it is that you can't be that rejected. I think quite often you have a nose too. You're going to run to my side every time I'm sick and give me all your money and do all the other things, then you can give you some more. But then they play it the other way. You know, finally one day they don't, you know, the parents get to stay a little bit. And the other children have abandoned a little bit. They kind of look up and they say, well, you know, son, I treated you wrong. I'm going to now accept you. Because at this point, they're not making you to make money. They're going to accept you now. And now they tell you that they love you. But you're still causing a trap on you. Now you continue to deal and support them because they love you. So the game goes on. So your parents can't go away. And it's we're in a similar situation. When these people finally hold hands with us and finally accept us, we're going to still be sacrificing and giving to their support. So in the end, what will they do? They will win both ways. And Brother Wallace illustrates the same kind of situation. This drive to be accepted and loved by the European, this ultimate priority of the European love and acceptance is at the midst of much of black madness and neurotic behavior. I often have to tell my students that my people were caught in this kind of game. As Jesus told the disciples who he told to follow me, and one of them said, I got to bury my mother. And he said, what? Let the dead bury me. You cannot go upon your mission and move forward if you're always looking back. You got to turn loose and face the future and deal with the reality of the situation. I often tell them, some of the people who come to my office who are suffering this kind of growth, and these growths, and have you ever thought about the possibility that your mother may never, that you may never gain a love and acceptance? You have got to go to her funeral. It's painful sometimes, and it hurts to turn that love and that hope loose. It's painful to face the possibility that she may, or he, or whoever, may never love you. But in order for you to achieve independence, in order for you to move under your own power, and to be self-motivated, and to concern yourself with your own development, and the development of your family, it becomes necessary for you to turn that hope loose and let it go. For us as a people, in order for us to move forward, we must turn the hope loose of the love and acceptance by the European nation. One of our the constancy is the European intention to maintain the dependency of blacks on European market. Now, this, as I indicated, will not be so much accomplished through brutal colonial subjugation of African people, but through the denying mechanisms such as the continued consumerism of our people. As I had warned you before, unfortunately, many of our leaders, when they talk about equality, talk about an equality of consumption. We're equal when we have the same kinds of house. We're equal when our children go to the same kinds of school. We're equal when we have some kind of equal income. We're equal when we get married, do this and that with them. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not equality. That is not equality at all. As I pointed out, you cannot buy yourself into equality. You cannot consume yourself into equality. The African nations are recognizing this. You cannot borrow yourself into equality. You must produce yourself into equality. I point out the man who drives the Cadillac is not equal to the man that makes the Cadillac. When we look at Japan, we see a country that is not behind it. That's like it closes its market to this country. It builds a wall between its countries and other nations, and it protects its industry. It does not play the free market game. And therefore, by protecting its interests, it contributes to its industry, and now it outproduces this country. And it gains in equality and more than equality through production and not through consumerism. And we as a people must recognize that we cannot, as a people, consume our way to equality. When we talk about equality, ladies and gentlemen, we must recognize that we are talking revolution. Those of you who thought this, I just want to be equal, I want to be the same. All right, let's be equal, let's be the same. For a moment. Let's be equal in military power. Let's be the same in technological advancement. Let's be the same in controlling the education of our children. Let's be the same in controlling the economics of our community. Let's be the same in those kinds of ways. But that's not the kind of thing that many of our leaders have led us to talk about. They're talking about that superficial things. This is the reason why I say to you that the destiny of the black child is revolutionary. If you're talking about true equality with the Europeans, then you are talking about revolution. Because when you look at our situation today, to be equal with that European is to create revolution in Africa. Europeans maintain the dependency of African people through economic and social integration. To work the idea Black Johnny works by the end is not equal to White Johnny works by the end. Even if they make the same sound. Even if Black Johnny is White Johnny's supervisor, he's still not equal to White Johnny. Even if Black Johnny sits on the board of directors of IBM and AT&T, he's not equal to the president or to the middle Smith White Johnny. Because they gentlemen to sit on that board, to sit behind that middle management desk, is not the same as having control over that country. Right. It's having control over the means of production. And it is here that equality is brought about. Not that we are sitting at a desk and maintaining a seat, or merely being integrated. The African communities and the African nations are being integrated into the world economy today. They're being integrated into the International Monetary Fund. They're being integrated into the World Bank and integrated into so-called gap treaties or other kinds. All of these integrations into these systems are dedicated toward one end, the maintenance of the capitalistic monopoly over the world's economy. And we have the meetings of the Trilateral Commission that met over 2 weeks ago or 2 or 3 weeks ago. And you will see in that paper talks about integrating the African economies and integrating the Asian economies and all of the other economies into one world economy. But it is that integration that will be the basis for the continued exploitation of our people. In fact, it makes the exploitation of our people much more efficient. It is to certainly our African nations are industrializing, but the plan is to industrialize and make smokestack industries of the so-called third world nations to fit the needs and the service needs of the European nations. So even the industrialization does not represent necessarily a movement forward in the sense of taking actual control over the economic system. The integration of the African man through the paper economy is another illusion. There's many of us who think because we have a few $1,000s in the bank, or we may have $1 million or $2 that we're rich. So, ladies and gentlemen, the dollar is a piece of paper. Ultimately, you cannot eat. It will not feed you, it will not protect you, it will not shelter you. A dollar is a colored piece of paper in and of itself. If that dollar moves, it loses its value tomorrow, which it can't be possible with that happen. All your nations would be like having $1 million Confederate dollars today, representing nothing. A landless people, a people who have no land, who have no control over resources, is healthy people. I don't care how many dollars they have in their pocket. He's been deceived into thinking, and it's the ownership of this illusory paper wealth that means of equality. But it is the control of the resources of our land that is the means. I talked to my sister the other day, and you look at it. What do we control? How do you control the food that you eat? How do you control the water that you drink? How do you control the electricity, the gas, and the fuel? When you look at it, ladies and gentlemen, we are living on a thin thread. And that any day the European decides that he wants to bring this thing to a close, are we in a position to survive? It is this kind of concern that we must be about. Another constantly is to maintain life in a state of relative technological backwardness. I'm amazed and I'm very happy I see all of this technology here. And I hope it's been used to return. But again, I'm concerned about much of the technology we see on our streets. That kind of technology there, and I see sometimes our young boys singing together. Oh, yes, his body was so heavy, he had to wrap it up with the carpet to keep it from cutting his head. And it took about 2 or 3 of them to carry down the road. Because the singing one time just over to the other, and then he went and poked the hose on out his kids to his back. The only thing that he's getting out of this technology are the playthings, the stereo, the big music boxes, the video games. Well, these technologies being produced by African people. The only thing I see these technologies doing to a great extent is driving out Trojan places. Going the whole the urban emphasis that I've lived here on the quality of education has little to do with the movement of white people fathers. But as you notice from those quotations, it has to do with the maintenance and the widening of the technological gap between Euro-Americans and other non-Europeans. They are concerned now that the Japanese are going to overtake them in technology. And the reason why they are concerned with their education is so that this technological gap, which the Japanese have closed to a great extent, is widened in the future. This constancy then will continue. Another constancy, of course, is the control over information, its form, distribution, and purpose. We have heard the main staff comment here when we saw the misinformation which began with the rewriting of Black history, and which continues today with the miseducation of our people. That miseducation that, by the way, is equal education. I'm going to use an illustration here that I have used frequently. The illustration of the Skinner rat, of the Pavlovian dog. And how Black Johnny and White Johnny sit in the same classroom. And the teacher who's going to give them equal education talks to them about conditioning, how you can modify the behavior of a dog, how by living, say, a light and food together over a period of time, the dog which naturally salivates when he sees food will begin to salivate upon seeing a light. So all we got to do now, and by controlling reinforcement, when and how it's going to get, and by setting a condition upon how it's going to get rewarded, that is, do this, then you'll get a reward. Do that, then you may get negative punishment. And by placing this rat into conditions, you can get this rat to do many curious things. Of course, those of you into the zoo have seen animals that train this way by people psychology. Someone told me the other day, called some groups, that they had reading. And he reads and say quack or something, he quack. And then he read another line that says turn around, turn around. And then he reads this and that, because it's the goose for me. But actually, it was done by conditioning and by what we call echo of reinforcement. Now then, Johnny and White Johnny can walk out of that classroom equally having learned about this conditioning situation. And now they know the same thing. But White Johnny has been disabled. He's been disabled because he knows exactly the same thing as White Johnny. Why? Because the doctor did not tell White Johnny he was the Pavlovian dog, that he is the Pavlovian rat. Then he's been disabled. When he does not tell White Johnny that the ghettos are BC, and that the Neocolonialism that Doc disclosed are but skin-uppers, designed and arranged a way so as to create a mentality and a behavior by people, that these are not skin-boxers, but pardon the phrase, they are nigger. They are a structure of conditions that are built to turn an African man into a nigger. And this is what comes out. If your psychology course does not teach you that, you have not received an equal education, ladies and gentlemen, because it does not speak to your heart. When White Johnny identifies with the experimenter who has control of that rat, who determines when that rat is going to eat, when it is going to sleep, what kind of conditions it lives in, his identification is correct and upon the mark. But when White Johnny identifies with that experimenter, he has misidentified himself. As I ask questions again, which one of you has control of the food you eat, of the water you drink, of the fuel you cook with, of the lights you use, of all of the basic necessities of life? And you will see that those things are under the control of the European. And he uses his control of those things to shape and create a Negro. So then it is that kind of psychology that must be learned. And that means then, the European though is not going to teach you that. He's basically going to give you the same kind that he's going to give his own little Johnny if he gives you that. But ultimately one that is going to cost you. As I mentioned earlier then, the education also applies to the creation of the image and imagination. And quite often the image and imagination that is created into our people is one that is geared to maintaining their subordination. The control of information is a control of a person's mind. The control of the words, as I've indicated, is the control of a person's mentality. One of the first things that the black professional must do is to redefine his situation, redefine the words, and rewrite the book. As I pointed out earlier, what you cannot imagine, you cannot produce. Now, we had many people who were a little afraid when the life of Muhammad told us that we were garments. Sounds frightening, didn't it? But we are God, ladies and gentlemen. In the sense that God said He made us in His image. And a part of that image is that He creates through imaging, and creates through imagination, and creates through the word, and creates through the manipulation of symbols. And consequently, then man, like God, creates in this way. And that if like man then becomes God-like, and becomes a God, he then can begin to create the world that he wants to exist. Of course, one of the other identities that the European seeks to maintain is, of course, as I pointed out, military power and various forms of warfare as the final means of imposing his imperial will. One of these days, Europeans probably will get tired of fighting wars by proxy, and using this nation and that nation of our world to fight each other. And finally, one day, perhaps when the Russians finally wrap up South America and brings it over into the prison camp if they succeed in doing so, this won't be the end of the game. In a sense, we kind of have the Third World War going on now. See, the Third World War does not necessarily have to involve the bumping, dropping of nuclear bombs. It can also be wars of attrition, where country by country and nation by nation is brought into the camp of one group of imperialists or the other. And despite those of you who out there may be Marxists and scientific socialists, the Russians are as imperialistic as others. And the minority of that country is called White Russia. And it rules over Muslims and other people of different ethnic groups. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics is a union of captive nations. When we look in Eastern Europe, it is a union of captive nations in Eastern Europe. This country is geared to the maintenance of the European as much as the United States is geared to the maintenance of the European. Moving from one camp to the other is not the salvation of our people. It is a plague on both of their houses that the black man must be alive. The military power of this country and the Europeans is geared to the point where if all else fails, he will impose upon the world his military rule. When diplomacy fails, we know then the outcome is war. And when these games that are going on, as kids hold the Middle Eastern people, we're not going to sit back and let them strangle us, you know. We might pay more for this oil and the stuff that you rate, but in the final count, you're not going to cut us off. We have developed the neutron bomb, not to fight the Russian tank, but to blow away these Arabs and leave their oil well standing so that we can suck this oil when they're dead and gone. And these weapons are hostage. But the great warfare and the military machinery is geared to building the relative defensiveness of African men. But one of the major things that's developing is not only the nuclear war, but what you might call psychological warfare and what you call psychochemical warfare. It's very terrifying, more so than nuclear weapons, to look at what is going on in biological warfare. This is a terrifying situation. Sometimes I wonder if this AIDS is not a part of an experiment run by the CIA to test out. It has been done before. Diseases have been let loose in the subways in New York City by the CIA. Diseases have been let loose over San Francisco and have killed people. Many of the psychologists, such as B.F. Skinner, many of well-known psychiatrists and other people participate avidly in the research having to do with the military. Many of the names that you study in these schools, you would be surprised, are a part of the military establishment and do research for America's military and psychological, sociological, and other kind of conquests. Even here recently, of course, you heard about even anthropologists serving as spies and serving as intelligence agents. There is not a discipline that is not used by the Europeans as a means of maintaining his or her power. You talk about LSD. You can go and look back at the FBI and the same records. Every new drug that comes out, the CIA is right on. Much of the research that you see in the universities are funded by CIA and CIA funds. You know that they have fancy names. And they come up with fantastic ideas. What will happen if we take LSD and with a good wind, just let the LSD blow into a community? And that way we can conquer a community without firing a shot. We would just disorient them and blow their minds, and when they wake up and come to their senses, we have them captured. Of course, we don't have to get into those fantastic trips. You can see the psychochemical warfare has taken place on the black community for quite some years now. The influx of heroin and other drugs into the black community is a part of the continuing warfare that the European has maintained against the black man. In putting those drugs into the hearts and minds and bodies of our people, we have literally torn up our cities as the bombs themselves have dropped directly upon those states. By introducing these drugs and biologicals into our community, we don't have to drop bombs on our buildings. We just turn our children loose on them, and they will tear them down brick by brick by hand. And we see it everywhere, the destruction of our community taking place. The European still wishes to shape and determine the African personality. When we look then, as I mentioned a while ago, about the association experiment with Pavlov, we see that to a great extent, the associative psychology of Pavlov refines the attempt of the Europeans to shape the character of our people. To a great extent, if you want to understand the character, personality, and capacity of our children, you have to ask yourself one major question. What character and capacity must the white man have in order that European continues to reign over him? Or you can ask it the other way. What must be missing in the black man's brain and character and personality if he is to remain subjugated by the Europeans? Once you answer those questions, you will see those characteristics missing in the personality of our children. Think about it for a moment. And you will see that the European arranges their society in such a way so as to create the need capacities in the black personality or to obliterate and neutralize the ones that, if they were to develop, would challenge his domination over the white man. So then we see these constancies that the European must maintain. Now the problem of the European is to maintain these constancies, to continue the oppression of the masses of Africans, to maintain European power while appearing not to do so, while appearing liberal and egalitarian and dedicated to the cause of freedom. How then can he maintain this enslavement of our people and yet at the same time be seen as the beacon of freedom? He must introduce and maintain a deceptive contradiction. He must create a myth of goodness, a cult of hope, while actually doing evil. He must appear to build while destroying. The creation of these contradictions must be brought into existence through certain socio-political arrangements. Every institution of the Eurocentric society must come into action as a means to maintain this contradiction. Welfare must create poverty. The family must create pathology. Health must create illness. Correction must make criminal. Education must bring about ignorance. Economics must show how we can continue to be exploited. The military must make us defenseless. And the church must make us irreligious. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen. I know they can't summary your family. But quite often it is the church that stays in the way. Go ahead. Go ahead. We have these people talking about the Prince of Peace killing. We have these people talking about the peace making war and destroying each other. They must not be reading their religious founders. There are very few, if any, ladies and gentlemen, Christians in this world. Yes. You call this a Christian nation? No way you can call it a Christian nation, ladies and gentlemen. If it follows the precepts of Christ, if it follows the Ten Commandments, if it havens this life after Christ, we wouldn't have to be here today talking the way we are talking right now. Often I've said, the white man, in order to control the world, this 10% of the population, as any devil must do, he must reverse the truth. The world must be turned backwards. You see. Right must appear to be wrong, and wrong right. The black man has been reversed. Think about it, statement. Look at this world we call a normal world. Look at this world filled with this drugs and crime and hatred and racism and greedy exploitation and its unhappiness and its abandonment of children and abuse of people. This is what we call a normal world, and normality is craziness. Think what would happen, ladies and gentlemen, as Christ said, the world was truly born again, which means to truly reverse the way things are. I've often pointed out the world is perfect. Yes, it's perfect. We didn't say that it was good. Perfection and goodness are not the same thing. You can be perfectly evil. But it's perfect in that it is lawful. We often use the illustration for that sort of, if you shoot a ball at a goal and you miss it, there's no error made. It didn't go where you intended to go, but it goes exactly where the laws of physics says it must go. And it's perfect. When you have a people that filled with the kind of greed and rapacious, exploitative motives and the kind of racism that is characteristic of too many nations and people on this earth, then warfare, death, robbery, and murder must follow. It follows perfectly in life. If you have a people filled with godliness and filled truly with love and filled truly with religion, then you could not have the kind of world that you have today. You cannot love your neighbor as thyself. You cannot see your neighbor as one with thyself, and cannot see yourself as one with the world, and create a world that's filled with rape, robbery, and murder. One thing follows the other. If we see the world the way it is the result of the mentality. That is the reason why I say that the goal of the black man is not equality with the white man. It's not the sameness with the white man. It is to bring into being a new world order. It has nothing to do with the presence of the white man. I don't be talking about new values that the white man did not exist in this world today. It's the kind of values that exist create the kind of world that we have today. So that the coming on to the world scene of the white man involves becoming on into the world of a brand new set of values and represents a rebirth of the world. Even though it seems as if I've gone through a lot of politics, I've gone through this illustrated course, that this is the context in which the black child is developed. It is within the context of the Europeans trying to maintain these constancies that the black child is created. And that you often, and we often as black parents, are used as the unwitting agents to create the kinds of children that the European needs. And I say about what qualities must be missing in order that the European maintain power in our over the black community. You will see them missing in our children. You must not read as well, because if you read as well, you might begin to get the kind of information and read in a way that will remove you from dependency upon this European, and it will move you into a creative and productive state of mind instead of one of dependency. You must not learn to think too abstractly. To a great extent, many of our adults and many of our children stop, unfortunately, growing at age 13. The mental capacity stops. It's no accident that TVs and radio programs are geared around age 12 to 13. If you read Piaget, this is the time he talks about concrete operation. When the child thinks concretely and solves problems as long as the object stage manipulates it right in front of it, and it can deal with tangible, concrete things. But as soon as you try to move it beyond the immediate and take it far into abstract thinking, it loses its way. To a good extent, then, in order to control the masses of people, the ruling class must maintain those masses of people at the concrete level of functioning. It permits them to run the factories and to run the concrete operations of the society, but does not permit them to see beyond the games and the charades that'll run upon them. Don't you know how different this world would be if the mass of the people could actually think abstractly and could actually critically and analytically think? Don't you know then that the domination of the masses of the people is dependent upon their not thinking? And that the domination of black people is based upon not permitting black children to develop to really great extent abstract abilities? And that is why you will find overdoses missing in your children because they must be missing. If the European is to maintain control. Now some of you in your mind say, well, I hope the black people take, there's a lot of mathematics and they got to get into those too. Those of you who managed to escape and move beyond that intellectual level, the game is set up in such a way that you're going to have such values and such love for your master. And so even when you think abstractly, you can't think abstractly for yourself. That's why you can't think of those degrees to take over that speed over there. But you can think abstractly and hustle for IBM and the rest of these games. So yes, that's the contradiction though, you see. The European is not going to stop people from getting an education, but he's going to control the kind of education he gets. So that the large percentage he's going to make drop out, and the rest of them that pays to work through the system will be so large and will have such a value system that they still cannot work in the interest of their people. So when he does not have to do the way the South African does, just completely knock out education, he's going to use education as his chief means of control. So you must recognize then that the kind of education that our black children are getting is an education to remain served. Even the higher education of life is still being to serve. One last statement. Not only then must the black child and black person possess a certain mental characteristic, but he must preserve and possess a certain psychological personality characteristic. Because the African personality must be destabilized and must be a neuroticized personality. As I've often said starkly, in order for the white man and the European to have control of us as he has, we literally have to be out of our minds. We have to be out of our senses. And this is the thing. The madness, the neurosis of our white people flows from a political, social situation. The individual trauma you run into in your black patients, black psychologists and psychiatrists, is but a reflection of the trauma of the black man. It is the political has only been personalized. I'll leave you here and leave room for some questions. Thank you very much.
I would like to ask you your opinion on the issue of black people returning their traditional religion and the ways of the traditional African. And we know that the traditional Africans ruled the world for thousands of years in peace and harmony because they were truly a God-fearing people. We are the God consciousness was interwoven into every aspect of their life.
Okay, you want to know my opinion on returning the African people to African religion and African ways and lifestyle. Frankly, I haven't started to move forward at the admit that. And I have thought about that tentatively. And so what I was saying, I'm not going to put it in concrete at this moment. So it's basically, I'm trying to work out the issue of what the African way of life really means in terms of survival of our people. Sometimes I am frankly disturbed by those of us who relatively pursue what we see as the African way of life. However, I hope, while that is to be commended, that this does not mean that we can recreate the African village. We cannot go back in history. I know, but I'm concerned with the fact that we have. My concern more so than recreating an African life is really the creation of a new African, of an African who is ready to meet the challenges of today's world and to be going on in this day and time. While that will involve the integration of African history and the putting back of the African way of life into our personality and into our minds, it will also involve a creation of a Pan-African also that does not exist at this moment. So it's an African that will have in it the history and experience of our people, the positive history and experience of our people, and of course the goals that you mentioned, where we will again influence the ways of this world and the direction of this world. But at the same time, an African who must recognize that there must be additional capacities, abilities, and directions added so that we can meet today's world. So this African will not be an exact duplicate of the Africans that we've known before.
Would you recommend Christianity as the religion of the new Africans here, or the way of our people, our ancestors?
Frankly, I don't recommend any particular church on the basis of that, because I separate religion from the church. Yeah, not exactly.
Dr. Amos, I want to thank you for that dynamic section. You crystallized the scientific breakthrough in the most dynamic form. What I'd like to ask you is, in the cultural matrix, Black culture, I know in Washington, there's a friend of mine that works on there, and they collect all kinds of music, literature of that. And I know it's controversial, guys. How do they go about using this against that for generations and generations and generations? And one of the questions is the book that came out on the story of it's a technical culture. And the distortion of that book, the way I was like, I was quite privy to that.
Okay. I think while it is honorable, pretty much the control will be the way it really is, when we all use, when we tend to get into African, pretty much the way when we got into the Afro. You see, when the Afro, when it first comes out, symbolizes a lot of things revolutionary about African people. And later on, of course, it is what we call co-opted and made into a fashion and made into a cultural kind of phenomenon, in fact, and thereby diffusing its revolutionary potential. Now, the collection of African artifacts and the collection of African dance and music can be also utilized for the same purpose. So, in fact, we can see that Europeans have been most avid in collecting those things. To a great extent, our collecting those things will be required getting that stuff back from them. But we have to recognize that African culture goes deeper than pictures and deeper than artifacts. It is basically concerned with a way of life and with maintaining the life of our people. And it is basically an intellectual tool, a scholastic tool, and a mental tool by which we advance the interests of our society. if these things will be only used for us to feel false pride about ourselves, to go out and have a little fun and feel good about ourselves, while not advancing our mental development and our economic and social development so as to remove Eurocentric domination, then these artifacts can be used against us, as they often are. The other question you mentioned was about the publishing of books in terms of the image of black children. The attempt of Europeans to manipulate the black mind through the control of black images continues very strongly up to this point. You can look at any cartoon show today and still see the darker represents blackness. Even when it's a white man, it's a darker white man, and the bad white man is usually darker than the good white man. All of these, he's not as dark, he has a black mustache and black hair. Or he's wearing black clothes. There's something to indicate that the darkness is subordinated. This subliminal control of the images of our people will continue and increase to the degree that the obvious racist control of our people decreases. Thank you. Thank you.
Not all of us come forward and send our children to private schools. However, there is
the public school definitely is destroying our children. The public school seems to be operating under the theory that minimal brain dysfunction
is what is so hurtful is that we have black teachers who also support this philosophy. Consequently, our curriculums are scaled down so that by the 12th grade, the black child has only received a 7th grade education. And it's awfully hard to fight the European educational school system when now it is manned by black people. In other words, we're fighting them. So how do you fight them successfully? The second question is, I have heard many black brothers and sisters come out with the correct responses as far as our oppression. But when I speak on the subject of homosexuality, that is part of the oppression also, then they become very upset and they think homosexuality is a preference of lifestyle. How do you deal with the people who want to let that go on? Thank
In terms of the education of our children and the fact that we as a people can now afford to send our children into private schools, I don't know, I before I could see that, I would really think that we should do a very solid study and see if that's possible. In fact, one of the articles I have here that I'm looking through was the article that also came out of the New York Times indicating the tremendous shift of children into private schools and into religious schools. And in fact, as it indicates here, the increase has been something like 47% and 49%. At one point in this article, which I, of course, cannot see at this point, I think as a quotation, here, it says, in contrast, the average tuition for the country's Christian schools, let me read further back. It says that tuition for boarding students in many of the private schools is $8,900. In contrast, average tuition for the country's Christian schools, according to the American Association of Christian Schools, is $800. I think the idea of whether we can finance a good deal of private education is something that we have to empirically look at before we consume. A lot of cost that is put into public education is not cost that is geared to the education of children. Do not be deceived into thinking that much of what is called cost of education is geared to your children. Now, one of the main things with this recent school battle that we've learned, and I've tried to get my students to it very quickly, because we as people must understand that the Board of Education is not about education. And the Board of Education is a business, and that it represents some $3 billion. And you can make a lot of people millionaires with that kind of money. And the major function, the reason why these Jews want to hold on to that system. And believe me, even with Alvarado there, they don't plan to turn it loose. That they are enriching themselves through the Board of Education. So I think when you pare it down, you will find that education is not nearly as expensive as we can think that it is. The other thing is, of course, that we as people have not determined to take over education. Right? And black teachers definitely in New York City are not in control of education by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think we should innovate this delivery program where in a sense we approach taking over education from the wrong end. Instead of starting so much at the chancellor level, we should work from the bottom up. And we should be dedicated as a people to moving our children, moving ourselves as teachers into the schools so that we can actually control the education of our children. Now, a part of the influence we should have is black educators, black social workers, and so forth. We can influence the schools of education or create our own schools of education. As I often said, I think many of our teachers, after they get through these schools, should go through a finishing school. And the black community should certify who teaches its children. That's right. And they go and learn an educational psychology based upon the history and experience of black people. We don't have time to show, of course, when I mentioned the fact that thinking must not occur in the black child, we must recognize what that means for curriculum training. That the black curriculum is very different from that of the white child's curriculum, in that we think that when we recognize what it is that the white society must read out of the black brains, we didn't know exactly where to put our curriculum. The first thing that we must do, and we must not give up, is to take over the public schools, is to get our teachers prepared to pass these public school exams and move into it and take over these boards of education in the communities as such. You mentioned about seventh grade competence. That's exactly why I indicated a while ago that very much the mental ability that this society plans to leave in its people is about the age of 14 and 13. And that's one of the reasons why that competence is built in delivery. Homosexuality is not a preference. It's not a preference. And we don't have time to get into the dynamics of homosexuality. It's not a thing that people get into by choice. The homosexual no more chooses, in the sense of deliberate thinking, to be a homosexual any more than you choose to be heterosexual. It is a set of conditions that exist in the homes, that exist sometimes even in the womb of the mother, and exist in the social political system that we live in that produces homosexuality. And once it is produced, it is a compelling type of motivation that the homosexual, him or herself, has little control. Now, I know that gets a lot of people off, but we have to deal with it specifically. And to a great extent, we are in a culture that, as a matter of controlling its populace, also tends to feminize men and to nationalize women. One of the things that we don't have time, I wish we had more time to do work, but maybe just do a question and answer session completely one day. We leave all the speeches off and deal with some of these issues. Because we can talk about this kind of thing. One of the things we must recognize, to a great extent, the Eurocentric culture tries to feminize black people. Yeah. And the relationship of even the black male to the European male, if you watch it carefully, is a feminine relationship. That's right. And this business of our black males running around here trying to get over through seduction, through superficial clothing and apparel, through nagging and creating guilt through all these things that we used to identify with the old female image still exists in our people. And this feminizing and this immaturizing of our people is necessary if colonialism is to continue. Brain damage is created by the culture. Well, I have to tell you. I just want to say, I will hold to come back because your question was so good that it must be dealt with at greater length. Because I'd like to talk to you about some of the things that are being done now in prenatal psychology, of how the personality is shaped in the womb of the mother, and how the environment does not begin once you step out, but begins in the mother's stomach itself. And how, in a sense, how this child in your womb hears. It sees life. It knows your unconscious thoughts as well as your conscious thoughts. It is affected by the environment as well as by the food. You can create a hostile environment by smoking and taking drugs and by being under emotional stress, and you can create such hostility in the environment that you've already lost the child's personality when it comes out of the womb. And it can be traumatized in the womb. So when it comes out, it is already destroyed the perception of reality. So much of this stuff we talked about in terms of homosexuality and the other problems that we see in our world is a problem that begins very early and is rooted in where God is, and of course as well as in the political situation. I'm not sure about that. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a oversight on your part when you talk about psychological warfare. And you mentioned Christianity. But you didn't mention the deleterious effect that the Islamic theology has on masses of people in North Africa, the United States of America. See, one thing that disturbs me is that when we talk about conversion from one state of mind which produced the natural African mind to fight and resist and create, to convert to Christianity and Islamic theology, seem to make it more appeasing and more compromising with the enemy. So I would like to discuss the question of conversion on both parts, both military effect, religiously, and the Christians imposing their religious doctrine and Islamic theology that, creates the whole jihad on the northern part of Africa. I haven't seen any change since we began to become Quranic people, if you want to call it that.
Okay. I love these choices. Again, and I have some regret because we even let go of our time right now. And this issue that you bring up is such a heat one, and the brain even treated in a fragmented proportion because it would leave too many people up in the air. Certainly, religion includes Christianity. In fact, sometimes I'm pessimistic when I look at the kind of things that people can believe and the kind of outright nonsense that can be pumped into people's heads and the extent to which they will go in terms of destroying themselves and others in the name of that nonsense. And much of it flows out of so-called organized religion. We know, of course, the Europeans use religion to subjugate our people and continues to use religion to subjugate our people. This is also true of other nations and of other people as well. One of the ways to study religion, of course, to look at it is as a form of brainwashing. And how an idea can be planted into a person's head. You see, conversion is very much operates on very much the same principles as any brainwashing does. It's basically the same principle. First of all, of course, when we look at black men as brainwashed into Christianity, the idea is, of course, How do you brainwash the person? You stress them, you conflict them, you make them see a previous form of life as being unworthy and so forth, and you separate them and isolate them from the original systems and beliefs so that they can use those original systems and beliefs as a means of interpreting and dealing with the world, and then you gain control over them in such a way that you can implant new ideas and new values that are consistent with your new system. This has been the case of many groups and nations with many kinds of religion. Often I'm discouraged about the way of the world and whether we can even save this world. And frankly, the reason why I'm most discouraged is because of what we call divisions. Because the things that I listed a while ago, when I can see so many people willing to destroy and kill and blame and restrict and subjugate people in the name of religion, and to see how much they accept much of the ignorance that is given in the name of religion to destroy themselves and to other people, I wonder if they'll ever get out of the mess that are in. But the thing that I really want to also separate is, do not confuse the doctrine of men with religion. I think the things that we are calling Islam and the things that we're calling Christianity and the things that you call Buddhism or all the other names you want to call are really the institutions of men. When you study the original founders, and if the people believe the way the original founders set down the original laws of believing and behaving, then what we call the problem created by religion will not be the problem that we see today. And Jesus talked about this, accepting the laws of God, the doctrine of men. Much of what you're talking about now is all that has been put in and built by egocentric and egotistic men, and not true religion. Because if you had true religion, you would not have the kind of problems that we have today.
I want to ask you a question about special education. What is your feeling about special education? Because I teach in special education, and it's my experience that a lot of these kids do not really belong there. They are the heads of the kids, they are the most resistant to the system, they do not want to control things, and they are placed there, and I think they are being misguided. Now, I am in my class, psychology classes, right, that I have to take, not based in all the teaching, that position, that they do not stress academics, okay? And that busing the answer, okay? And I want you to deal with each one.
Okay. It's on one level, I think we should have special education. In the sense of if it were a special Afrocentric education. In a sense, then our children need an education that meets our specific needs as a people on the earth. That kind of special education, of course, I can support, and I think we really need. But the kind of special education you talked about, I agree with your sentiments, where like Alton has said before, if you're dumb, you're dumb. You're dumb, you're dumb. That's what they're dumb. And I say this in reference to special ed, you see, because the Europeans just tell us that we were having problems because of our innate Africanness, you know. Of course, we gentlemen that we were innately intelligent. Well, you know, we fought against that, we had whole riots about this intelligence test and so forth, and that was removed. And now, of course, you don't hear us talk about so much intelligence test, but you see a whole host of other tests that have jumped up in their place. You know, reading test, math test, diagnostic test, this kind of test. But in the end, it leads to exactly the same consequences. If you put the intelligence test and say you weren't intelligent, you went into the special class, now you're going to take the reading and math and other kind of test, and you're still up in the special class. So it's part of this contradiction and the change in appearances that I was talking about earlier.
So now to keep the child like child in a class that's not going to educate it, not in the name of it being innately unintelligent, but in the name of being disadvantaged. Minimally brain damage, which means, of course, you can't, which means that you can't find any brain damage. So you can contribute to brain damage. There's no proof at all of the brain damage whatsoever. But of course, it's also another means by which the system, again, as I say, introduces the contradiction, you see, and create and maintain itself by contradiction. Rather than keep your education, it claims to educate you, but then it creates itself an excuse for you not learning. So then the child and the teacher gets an excuse. Well, if it doesn't learn, that's because it's a special education. And the child says, if I don't learn, that's because I'm in special education. And they're going to have the sense of trying to educate our children while actually doing nothing. The other game is, of course, the economic game that's run on there, to where they're being funded in terms of special education, and you find situations where, also I said, let's put it this way, you see, we got to stop looking at these things in terms of their name. As I've indicated before, do not, when there is something to call education, the Board of Education, do not assume it's without education. When you see something called the Department of Correction, do not assume it's without education, or because it's called welfare. The thing, yes, the other things, you see, we need to want the name. And yet, you have to look at these things, it's much more productive to look at these things as industry, as business, so that there is an industry that feeds into it and corrections like oil. And where the lawyers and the judges and the correction officers and the vendors that sell and the people that build prisons and everybody gets their buck out of protesting black bodies. Every major institution you have to deal with. Education is the same thing. When you get special education, all of what we have then is a bunch of people who are making money, being funded, and being supported by manufacturing and processing the raw material of our black children. And who will be the raw material? It will be the people who have the weakest economic and political power. And what becomes raw material as a process through that system. And I said about so, the ultimate thing is that it depends upon the ignorance and stupidity of black people, and therefore education must be a part of making that ignorance and stupidity a reality. And you couldn't. Special education and even regular education is a part of that system. This is the thing that we must recognize and love.
Well, this is congratulations on your very confident presentation. Recently, regarding the mediocrity of the educational system in this country, 70% of the students studying engineering in graduate school were all foreign students. To the dismay of the deans, who said that if we lost all these students, we might as well shut down the engineering school. Now, I have made personal inquiry into the number of African students in the United States and abroad who are studying these technological institutions. And I have learned that 80% of the students, black students, studying science and engineering are foreign students. To be kindly expanded.
Okay. That's nice to forget that this business of foreigners being a part of the science and technology of the country is nothing new at all. In fact, when we look at the World War II, we see American technology being supported, of course, by kidnapped German scientists. And we talk about Einstein, we talk about the scientists out of Germany, you talk about Niels Bohr, and you talk about many of the men that fought both the atomic age and the nuclear age were foreign. And as I mentioned earlier, to a great extent, much of what we attribute to American technology has been the result all of that is foreigners work for the American establishment and are being with foreign brain. The reason why I think this has become so noticeable at this time is that now we can't continue to steal these people's brains anymore. And they can have their own brains, and Americans begin to realize that if it must maintain and go ahead in terms of technological development, then it's got to develop its own brains and stuff. And now all of a sudden this foreign business is coming before us. The other question being raised there is a very intriguing one, and again one that I've seen many people wrestle with, and that I have especially wrestled with myself. And that is, of course, that foreigners, blacks, non-so-called Americans, like, are represented in these engineering fields and in the scientific field. I think we have to look, and we don't have to come back, we have to look, first of all, of course, at the history and experience of the black man. One thing about the history and experience of the black man in this country is, and one of the reasons why we see that white college is not existent, literacy as faculty, mathematical ability, is that, of course, there's been a history of the non-reinforcement of black people for these abilities. That actually, when you have a history of their so-called smart niggers have been punished for exhibiting these kinds of abilities. And when we have a system that will pay you millions for playing basketball and dancing and singing and doing all the other things and won't even give you a job in a scientific and other establishment. Or you have a system where in order to do the kind of scientific research that's necessary today, you must get into universities and other places where you have the kinds of equipment that's necessary that has excluded our people out of that. To a great extent, many of us have learned a conscious and unconscious lesson that going into science and technology is not the way to go for the African American. And also a system that is propagandized most heavily to black people, that black people cannot do math, and black people cannot do science, and black people cannot do the heavy kind of abstract thinking. That's the whole point of Consumerism. The whole point of this controversy about the IQ and all of this talking about reading and so forth has been here to try to convince us that we as people are not capable of doing this kind of scientific thinking. The other aspect of it is, of course, we have to look at the kind of history of slavery and emancipation and the differences in the nature of slavery as it existed in the islands and the experience of the black man that exists in the islands and that exists in this country. And you will begin, I think, if you study that closely enough, to see that this has created a different set of attitudes toward science and technology, a different set of motivation for the achievement of scientific excellence and for the development of science and technology stuff. In fact, I think if you read study and talk some of the different history in some of the blacks and northern blacks, and the history of people who had a little more control over their education and a little more control over their economy and a little more control over their community, and people who were taught by their own color, and people who, even though they were segregated in the city, still had a sense of community. You will see to a great extent that black scientists and other people are coming to out of the South as compared to those blacks who come out of the North. So you really have to study the social and political dynamics.